Our bodies talk. Energy levels, moods, inflammation, cravings, and skin are our body's main communicators. Translating these symptoms into understanding and then finding actionable steps can feel like an impossible journey. The good news, you're not alone. This week, Sheeva Stephens joins In the Calm. Sheeva is a functional medicine coach, functional blood chemistry specialist, and brain health specialist. She shares her story of having amazing success in fitness and coaching worlds to then being hit with a major health crisis with inflammation, ADD, anxiety, depression, and much more. Her struggles in healing became the catalyst to her wanting to help others reclaim their physical and mental health. Let's dive in. Welcome to In the Calm. I'm your host, Georgiana Alexander. Sheeva, welcome. So excited to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super pumped to talk about this.
So often I get asked about wellness journeys and tips and things like that, and I can share my experience and my background, my journey, but I feel like it's so valuable to really be able to point and direct people towards functional medicine experts to really talk about things specifically to their body and needs. I just want to dive right in. You're a functional medicine coach, blood chemistry specialist, and brain health specialist.
Yeah.
But this isn't where you began, right? Like you had a completely different introduction to this journey.
Yeah. So when I was 12 years old, I was diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety and depression. So, early on, I was struggling with something and they thought it was mental health. Fast forward to about 10 years ago, I've been in the fitness and wellness industry for about 20 years now. And fitness and nutrition have always been a passion of mine because of how much better it made me feel. And it really changed my life, right? And so I wanted to help other people feel the same. And so I was co-owning 2 local gyms in Nashville and I loved it. It was such an unbelievable experience, but I was also in a place of like complete stress, overdoing it. I was on Adderall, which is for ADHD. I was on an anxiety med. I was on a ton of medications thinking that is the route I was supposed to take because that's what I was taught. And then I started to gain weight out of nowhere, 20 pounds. And for someone who's in the fitness industry and, knows a lot about nutrition and knows what I'm doing for my body, it was a shock. My anxiety was through the roof. I was constantly in this place of just feeling scattered, which means my medication wasn't working for me, And so I tried everything I knew possible to make things change. And that included, keto, intermittent fasting, high intensity exercise for 7 days a week, doing these resets where I didn't eat for a few days, and nothing was working. And it was honestly just making me worse. I went to doctors thinking, okay, maybe there's another solution. And all I ever got was more medication. And at that point I was like, okay, something's just not right. I started to try to taper off my medications and was having a lot of withdrawal symptoms and having a lot of issues. Just started to research into functional medicine a little bit more and looking at my symptoms and literally Googling it and being like, what is this? I also had a few friends who kind of understood it a little bit better. I was tapering off. I really realized the importance of inflammation and realized that's what was happening. All the things I was doing that I thought were right, which was intermittent fasting, high intensity exercise, the medications, all of that compiled over the years, right? And turned into something that my body was like, we're done, right? Like we're done.
Yeah.
And so the tapering process was hard. And I definitely wish I had that guidance then when I was trying to taper off and I didn't. Like I said, I took my health into my own hands and started to figure out that certain ingredients that I was eating was causing more of an issue and that I needed to rest my body more, right? And so at that point, when I started to lose the weight and the anxiety decreased, and I also realized that a lot of the medications I was taking was causing so many of the side effects, that I decided to go back to school and become a functional medicine coach, functional blood chemistry specialist, and also a brain health specialist. That's kind of been my journey. It was my own pain that pushed me into trying to find a solution for other women because there's so many people out there struggling right now.
There's so much
Yeah.
information moving
Yeah.
in all different directions, right? And
Yes.
so every half a week, we switch our ideas of what we think we're supposed to be told.
Exactly. Yeah.
Food is healthy one day, unhealthy the next day, and
Yeah.
it's just complete confusion.
Yeah. And that's because no one's getting individualized protocols, right? And they're
Right.
not looking into their own selves because everyone's different. What works for me is not going to work for you. Some things might, but one, you have to have the guidance of someone who knows what they're talking about because we can start something and then maybe not see the results as quickly as we want them to. And then we stop and we see something else, the ADHD of like, oh, maybe this,
Hmm.
and we, halfway try so many things that don't work for us. And then we feel like giving up, because it's nothing's working, right? How I have changed things and I've literally taken, I went to over 40 to 50 doctors over the last 7 to 8 years. I
Wow.
saw functional medicine doctors. I saw conventional, MDs as well. And I took what I loved and what I hated and made it into what I'm doing now, right? It's like, okay, I like the way this was. I don't like the way this was. And so I've made this program that really fits, being able to make change and make it long term, right?
Right. Let's talk about that a little bit because I know in my health journey, when I was in my late teens, I was in a toxic relationship, which, as we know, the emotional stress of things that can
Yeah,
be its own culprit in and of itself. And a lot of
totally.
times, the medical facilities just don't recognize that, the doctors that you
Yeah,
talk to. And then that leads to misdiagnosis, that leads to over medication. I also was ADD and had, Ritalin and all these things. So I understand that journey. I think a lot of people have been down their own version of that story. But so often we go to the places that we think are going to just solve the problems and find the answers. And I know, I mean, if you went to 40 different doctors,
yeah,
you experienced that. And it's not to discredit anything of any medical field, but it really
totally.
is trial and error. For you, how did you navigate that experience of going to these different places and finding pieces, but not your fit? What kept
Yeah.
going forward?
So I'm a type A human being that really just, I was so determined. I refused to say, this is my reality, like
Yeah.
I knew something wasn't right. And the more and more I talked to people, they told me, like Adderall might take some time to get, heal from, right? Or there's so many different things that I was experiencing. And I think, the most important part for me was that I was seeing little things happen, right? That were changing. And so because I was seeing little things changing, I was like, I'm on the right path.
Mhm.
And every single time I would ever go to a doctor or somewhere new, I would say, okay, you're going to learn something from this. And everything is going to be the wrong thing until it's the right. And
Yeah.
so that's such an important message for me to say because sometimes people are like, what's the point? It's because all of the other things that didn't work aren't going to work because they're not the right fit, And so you have to keep going until you find that thing. It's going to happen. And sometimes it takes time. And so yeah, I'm just a really determined person. And I saw a lot of, I was like, I want my life back. I saw a lot of value in my career, right? Like I wanted to do more with my life. And so I kept pushing.
That tenacity, that type A, but everyone listening, we can learn from that because these stories of pushing through that there are answers. It's
Yes.
not always the easiest road, but just as you
Yeah.
said, it's in the challenges and in the finding yourself that you can get very, very rooted in who you are and your own voice and in your determination to find your wellness and health.
Yeah. And, we often go after quick fixes and
Yeah,
society in
we are a
general.
culture of quick
Yeah.
fixes.
And if you want a long term solution, the amount of time you ruined your body, like it can take a little bit more time for you to get it back, depending on what your, situation is. I've got some clients who in 1 week see huge results. And majority of them do, but some of them need a little bit more time. And so that's why I've implemented an 8 to 12 week program, because you have to consistently do something for a little while and do the trial and error to really see the results that you want.
And you can speak to this probably more so than I can, but I feel like sometimes when our body's been in basically a trauma response, right? Like it's shutting down, it sometimes takes a while for that freeze mode to unwind, for the body to start to see shift.
Yeah. So a big part of what I teach, and that was so important to me, was nervous system regulation, right? And so not feeling well is trauma, right? If you're consistently not feeling well, that's traumatic. That means you don't trust your body. And so that is something that I often help people so that they trust their bodies a little bit more and really learn how to navigate that, because it's not easy.
That's beautiful. I love that. So, okay, that leads us into, I really want to talk about this methodology that you work within, which is the root cause approach, and also functional medicine in general. I know it's more trendy now. Functional medicine is a terminology that we are more familiar with, but a lot of people listening may still be like, but what does that actually mean? So can you walk us through?
Yeah. So root cause approach, oftentimes if you go to an MD, they're looking at a symptom, right? They're like, oh, you have anxiety. Here's something to fix that anxiety. Or you go to a specialist and they look at your organ, right? And they're like, okay, this specific organ, let's fix this organ. The approach, functional medicine and root cause approach, which is what I do, is looking at the body as a whole, right? So, I'm not going in and fixing one thing. I'm giving you 4 or 5 or 6 different things that are going to fix a lot of symptoms at once, right? Not only do you see results quicker because of that, the body works in unison, right? Like your liver affects your hormone imbalance, right? So when those things are happening, you can't just focus on hormones only. You can't just focus on gut only. They all work together. So working on all of those things at once and doing them in a fashion where you're looking at high priority first is kind of the method that I work with.
That's amazing, because I feel like it really gives people a place to start, take steps through, see progress, have your support to shift, pivot where need be, and work through the changes, because every change that you make leads to possible other shifts in this approach, right? And as you make changes, the next thing is ready to unfold and heal.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, your sleep, your digestive issues, all of that could be linked to blood sugar imbalance. So all of these symptoms really could be 3 or 4 things that you need to really improve, right?
Exactly. So going a little bit deeper into the work that you do, I know that we've talked about you do different blood panels and things like that. What are some of the key markers, or what are some of the steps that you take with people as you're seeing them that you recommend? Like, I know you said your 8-week program.
Yeah.
What does this look like?
Yeah. So I actually, depending on where the person's at in the process, I really like to focus on the basics first. And that is going to include, body balancing nutrition, making sure that you're eliminating sabotaging food habits. And a lot of this is surrounded by reducing inflammation, right? So my program and what I focus on is the science of inflammation and how it affects mental health and weight gain. And so, we start with that. We start with the nutrition portion. We tweak the exercise based on how they're feeling, after their exercise. We work on nervous system regulation and things that are going to calm the body so it can heal. We work on drainage pathways. We want to make sure that you're detoxifying and you're getting toxins out of your body and there's not an overload in your system, right? And then physician formulated supplements, because, I don't love to pile a ton of supplements on people, but there are some core ones that you can really work on that are going to just ultimately give you more protein in your body, add more minerals, add more vitamins. Our food's not the same anymore, and we're not getting as much as we should. So we really focus on just making sure, are you eating enough nutrients? Like, do you have enough in your body for it to function properly? Which most women I work with aren't eating enough, and they're not starving themselves. They just don't realize that they're not eating enough. And they're not eating enough of the right things. So that's how I start with my clients.
Mhm.
And then unless they've already done all of those steps and those are taken care of, and then I'm going to do some blood work and see, okay, is there anything else that we're missing? Some of the main things that I look at are going to be nutrient deficiencies. So that's going to be, zinc and copper, vitamin D, B12. Some of the main ones that I'm looking at, just like, for example, if they have anxiety, I'm going to look at these markers, right?
Right.
So just making sure there's not a deficiency in their body. And then I look at thyroid, I look at hormones. We do stool samples, right? So is there something going on in the gut? So we kind of look at all of those things. I look at some of the basic things that are going to make sure that your liver's functioning correctly, your kidneys functioning correctly. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I start. And then based on what we see in the first set of labs, we'll do more.
So kind of to go back, I know a lot of women listening are coming through their 20s, but you don't necessarily notice your nutrient deficiencies as much in your 20s in most cases. But then as you move into your 30s and 40s and so on, it really does start to show up in different ways in your body. For women that you are seeing with nutrient deficiencies, I know this is something you work a lot with. So with things that we eat, oftentimes we really feel like we're getting great nutrients. We're like, oh, I'm going to go for this low cholesterol, low fat processed item. Where are you seeing your clients misinterpret what they're eating and intaking?
Yeah, well, first I want to say what's causing the deficiencies. One, higher stress as we get into our 30s and 40s, right? Busy, constantly go, go, go. So they grab whatever they can, which oftentimes convenient foods are not going to be as healthy, right? And then for the most part, when it comes to what they're not eating enough of, like protein, for example, most women are not eating enough protein. Minerals is another one that I see that's just, they're not getting enough of. So those are the two main ones that I see across the board that need to be increased.
I feel like I'm definitely in that boat where I ebb and flow with my protein, but you really feel a difference, and you feel a difference in the moments in life when you really need it, right? Like when we're in low stress,
totally,
pandemic, all of that. My lower protein lifestyle, it was sufficient, right? But as we move into different phases, it really is noticeable in our bodies. So that's very key to look at. And going back to your point as well on inflammation, this is something that's fascinating to me because it's something that I feel like most people have had experience with in some form or fashion, but it can very easily become a chronic scenario. And we may not even recognize the early stages of that. Can you kind of dive in a bit more to inflammation?
Yeah, so it is. It's one of those that people don't realize it's actually inflammation, right? They think it's either weight gain or life is just stressful or whatever it is. And so inflammation in general, what I recommend when it comes to figuring out if it's inflammation or not and what's going on is really getting into a full spectrum investigation. And so we talked about this already a little bit, but it's really diving into a symptom burden analysis. And that is 300 question, multiple choice of like symptoms that really get you your high priority. Is it thyroid that's a big problem? Is it minerals? Is it blood sugar imbalance? Is it your diet? Are you on too many medications? So it kind of shows where we need to focus on and we need to get started on. And then also an awareness journal. So like, how many hours of sleep did you get? How many bowel movements did you have a day? Like how much protein did you get? So we're looking at what you're eating, what you're doing. And then through that, I can really understand, okay, this is what's causing inflammation, right? Like they have not had a bowel movement in 4 days. This is a problem, right? So like, so those are some of the
we need more than one poop every 4 days, right?
Yeah.
100%. How many poops should people be having? When you say like
one to three a day.
Okay, one to three. 1 to 3, everybody. 1 to 3.
Yeah. It's actually like one of the most important things to look at when it comes to your health. So we always talk about poop because,
I know. It's good stuff though. I mean, it's very telling, right?
Yeah.
Very telling. I was actually speaking with a woman that studies, she's a scientist of water, right? So she studies water, freezes it, and interprets it. It's incredible. But she also works with someone that studies poo and uses a crystalline method to study poo. And so we had a whole conversation about that recently. Poo is fascinating. It is really very, very telling.
It really is.
We don't need to deep dive into poo, but
I love it.
But okay. So poo is important, getting the inflammation down and really I think I love what you said about awareness journal, because I do think that
Yes.
very quickly our time can pass and suddenly inflammation or these symptoms are chronic and we don't really put it together. We just kind of think, oh, well, that's happened for a minute, but really it's been ongoing for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great tip. What are some other tips or things that people can do to get inflammation down?
Yeah. So the things I was talking about before, the body balancing nutrition is really important. Regulating your nervous system, making sure that your detox pathways are open. So those are some of the things that are really important when it comes to, reducing overall inflammation. For example, like if you're eating an ingredient that your body just doesn't like or is causing more inflammation in the state you are currently in, it's really important to eliminate it. I'm not a big fan of eliminating 30 ingredients and not being able to eat, what you want, but really looking at those top 5 inflammatory or top 4 inflammatory ingredients like inflammatory oils and, refined sugars, right?
Mhm.
Artificial flavors, gluten and dairy. So those are like the top 5 I see do the most damage for people. And so we always start there. And I really like to do, again, investigation. Like, how is your body reacting to something? If you're feeling tired or brain fog after a meal, or if you're feeling gassy or bloated, it's something to look at. So I really focus on those top 4 or 5.
In my life, I've noticed a strong correlation with emotional well-being. And I know that
Yeah.
is, I've done your intake form. It's very thorough, really fantastic. And the emotional well-being part, I think,
Yeah.
and, really looking at factors of trauma and stress, these underlying components, that really does tie back to the functional medicine mentality, where there could be a lot of things that shift and change in your life that start to come up, or as stress changes, these things
Yeah.
shift and that can impact what's happening. So it's so important to look at all these things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For small steps that anyone can start with, like, what are your thoughts on the lemon water, the celery? Like, do you feel like those are helpful
Yeah, I
to
think
you
I
with
think lemon water is
people?
great. I have a hard time giving, hey, start here. I would say try to eliminate the top 5 inflammatory ingredients.
Hmm.
Really making sure that you are getting enough water in your day. Lemon water is an awesome option, but it really just depends on the symptoms, right? And so I really like to look at what the symptoms are and then go from there. High protein is great. Paying attention to how you feel when you exercise and making sure that when you were exercising, do you feel energized after? Do you feel more bloated after? Like what are you feeling? And so I recommend investigating for yourself and paying attention, because we fly through life. Like we fly through, we're not paying attention to how we're feeling. And then we wake up one day and we're like, oh my gosh, I feel horrible. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
When really it's oftentimes been building over time. But again, we
Yeah.
don't recognize it because we are flying,
Yes.
we're disconnected
Yep.
to the small, subtle signals until something blows out, the
Yeah.
tire blows out and we're left wondering what has happened with our lives. I know that you've had experience again with coming through your ADD journey, and even you've posted and shared about just being able to work out without inflammation. How is that journey in terms of like being able to stick with the mindset? Again, you're type A, but like
Yeah.
for everyone listening, working through this process, right, of sticking to something, of being able to show up and see small step results, like what would your advice be to that?
You know, for me, it starts small, right? Like small habit stacks. And whether, it's going outside when you first wake up and just putting your face in the sun every day, going for a 15, 20-minute walk a day. It's starting small, right? And starting that, feeling good in that, and then increasing to something else that makes you feel even better. And that's kind of what I've done with my journey of, feeling less inflamed and making sure my body can handle certain things. It's like I start with smaller things and then I stack and continue to increase as much as I know my body can handle, right? So I think it's just getting started with anything small that feels good to you on a regular basis.
Especially, I think with, what comes to mind is the gym, right? Because
Yeah.
it's starting with the fitness program, starting small, stacking. I know personally, I will go through different phases of inflammation in
Yeah.
working out, right? And there's certain times like more intensive workouts, I'm definitely going to get more inflamed.
Yeah.
And it also depends on where I'm living, right? In more humid, hot areas, times of the year, I notice that in my body. So I love that you're saying, notice your body, pay attention to
Yeah.
what it's telling you, and then start small and
Yep.
make those steps forward. And I think we are such a culture of wanting to see the immediate results and the outcome. And there's so much value in taking those small steps and really letting it unfold, letting your health rebuild.
Yeah, but also celebrating those small wins, like
Mm,
what are your expectations out of what you're doing, And so whenever I goal set with my clients, it's like you're going to meal prep. What is that for? When are you going to do it? What time are you going to do it? Right? So like getting pre-planning and having expectations for what you were going to get out of it and being happy when you, I don't know, feel a little bit of a better mood after a certain workout. Maybe you didn't hit it as hard as you normally wanted to, but what was positive about what you did today, right? Like, and really focusing on that instead of the end result.
exactly. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. That's such a good reminder to
Yeah.
take the small wins. One thing I really wanted to kind of dive in with you is that you have shared that you had your breast implant removal
Yeah.
journey. And that was a whole process. That was a part of a lot of the symptoms that you were seeing, as well as the over medication.
Yeah.
But will you share with us? Because I know sometimes people are seeing symptoms that they're not associating with their breast implants. And there's so much information that's again static noise on the internet. I would just love to hear your journey and your perspective.
Yeah. So about 8 years ago, when I completely got off my medications, and at that point, I was actually feeling great when I'd figured out what was going on with my body. But there was a couple things that were lacking for me as I continued on. And then it was right after COVID that I was like, okay, I've tried everything, and had a couple doctor friends tell me like, there's one thing that could be causing a lot of your issues. Not even just causing your issues, but stopping you from healing, right? Because
Mm,
it's another layer of what needs to be happening that could be causing inflammation in your body, right? So we talk about the toxin burden load.
right.
And so, I think the load was too high when I was having my implants in. So it was after COVID. And I do believe that when we have viruses like that, they can definitely trigger more issues and problems in your body. I started to have some major inflammation again, and I was down to eating like 6 or 7 ingredients. I wasn't eating a lot of ingredients. I had eliminated so much. So yeah, I got to a place this past year that I was like, this has to help, like it has to help. It might not fix me, but it has to help. And so May of last year, it'll be a year this May, I decided to get my implants taken out, and it was wild to see the changes that happened whenever I got
Wow.
them out. I literally lost 10 pounds of inflammation very, very quickly. My message for anyone who thinks that they might be struggling with this, or this might be kind of causing some of the issues that they're having, is to try everything you can before, right? And making sure that you're eating healthy. I had eliminated alcohol. Like I had done everything that I knew to do. And so I just finally was like, I don't want these in my body anymore. So try everything you can. And if it's still an issue for you, it was not a painful process. I was so scared to do it. And afterwards, I was like, I love the way my body looks now, right? Like, there's
Mhm.
all these fears as a female, one, physically looking a certain way. And two, I feared, will this help? But when I thought about it more, I was like, I'd have to replace these every 10 years. That was thought in my brain. And I was like, okay, no matter if this improves or not, I'm doing good for my body. And I know I'm doing good for my body,
Yeah.
right? And I'm saving money at the same time.
Right.
So yeah, I took the leap, and I'm so glad I did. I mean, it's really taken me a few months to get balanced out, but I'm feeling the best I've ever felt.
That's amazing. I
Yeah.
think that it is something that's very much overlooked. And for a lot of people, they don't have any issue with it. But like you did, you went through every other possibility. You healed yourself from all
Yeah.
of the other areas in your life.
Yeah.
You found this new passion, even in your wellness journey, going into functional medicine. And it was still creating a toxic overload in your system. I know personally, I was on the table. I think it was maybe 2004 planning to get breast implants. I had my appointment set, and I'm a person that's very reactive to even over-the-counter medications. I have to be really careful.
Same.
And I sat there and I'm like, hold on a second. I'm putting something in that it's not just going to go away like an over-the-counter. And I decided I'm going to wait on this. At that time, there was no information. You couldn't find anything. It was just listening to that gut of like, wait a second. Like if I even have eyelashes on, like fake lashes, I start to have a reaction after a period of time, or the wrong hair color, those sensitivities. There's certain things that are just not natural for your body. Other people have zero issue. And so listening to your instincts and just going with that. And I just love that you feel so much better. And I'm glad there's more communication about that. Now I think more doctors are on the front end talking about this. But at that time, and for a lot of people, maybe where they're going, they're not getting that information.
Yeah. And just, again, it's all about paying attention to knowing your body. Like, do you have major hangovers when you drink? Do you have detoxification issues in general, right? Because it really does start in our genetics. And then whatever we do to our bodies over and over and over again causes more issues. And the idea of like thinking about it, like, I was in my 20s. Life was different then, you know, and I think about it now and I'm like, literally put sacks of chemicals in my body. Like it doesn't add up. And for it to cause issues makes perfect sense. Your body is going to continuously attack that thing because it doesn't understand what it is, right? And so, that's why it builds a capsule around the implants. It's protecting your body from what's in it. And so it's pretty wild.
It's amazing,
pretty wild,
right?
Yeah.
It's amazing the way that the body works and when you really think about the engineering of our system. And it makes sense why what we put into our bodies, not just with our food, but as you address, with our relationships, with our emotions, with our well-being, all of these different arms and facets, it makes the difference. It is why we're being woken up to say, hey, with mental health issues on the rise, with inflammation and autoimmune triggers from really the pandemic and going through a collective trauma and going through just all of the different stressors, that have unfolded in the past couple of years, like everyone, I think, is benefiting from taking a step back and really looking at their health and wellness and where they're at in their life.
Yeah. There's been an awakening over the last few years for sure. And it's great to see it because, the symptoms will just continue to get worse and putting people in a place that just is intolerable. I'm very thankful for the message that is being put out there. Although overwhelming sometimes, but definitely good.
Definitely overwhelming.
Yeah.
If you want to get scared fast, Google illnesses. You're dying over everything. But really, it's amazing to have that access to information. And it's incredibly overwhelming. That ties in. I want you to share about your program. You offer telehealth, so you can help anyone in different locations. What does working with you look like?
Yeah. So working with me looks like committing to 8 to 12 weeks with me. I do weekly Zoom calls. It's all so much accountability and mentorship that goes on with habit change and really improving symptoms like chronic anxiety, chronic, fatigue, brain fog, weight gain. We tackle whatever symptoms you really struggle with. I specifically work with women over 30 who the method that they did in their 20s is no longer working for them. And they really want to improve the scattered brain, the fatigue, the weight gain, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I've heard so many women in their 30s and 40s and even 50s that suddenly who've never had any issue with ADD or diagnosis and now being put on medication for ADD.
That's what we're putting in our body.
Yeah. And instead, we could be addressing the root cause of what's happening versus being labeled as ADD.
Yeah. What I always tell my clients too is, this information is helping you understand your body better. You're going to use these tools forever. This is a long-term solution. Whether you quote unquote fall off the wagon or whatever it is, you know where to go back to whenever you're ready to make the change again, whether I'm around or not, right? And so understanding your body is literally the core of making long-term changes. Because if you don't understand what's going on with your body, then you're scrounging to figure out, oh, is it this? Is it this? Is it this? When you know then you can confidently say, okay, then I need to do this to fix it.
Right.
Yeah.
That going inward, building your own empowerment,
Yep.
building your trust within yourself,
Yes.
and having the tools to, as things change, as they do in time, going back to that trust place
Yeah.
within yourself. That is powerful. That is powerful. Thank you so much for sharing this wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
Before we leave you, I would love for you to share your favorite self-care rituals for you. What resonates for you?
I would say walking daily is like my absolute favorite.
Yes.
It is no phone, walk daily, listen to music really loud is another one. I love to do that. It's a huge mood booster. I definitely eat within the first 30 minutes of waking up. That's really important for me. And then yeah, like just downtown time. Like we're constantly on the go, and I really force myself to slow down weekly, right? Like taking
Mhm.
a day to just do nothing, like it's okay to do nothing. So I would say those are my favorite.
I love that. Especially,
Yeah.
what's your favorite song? Like what's your go-to for the
I don't really have
loudest?
a favorite song. I feel like I like all genres but country music, to be honest.
And we're here in Nashville. I
Yeah.
love it.
I know, right?
That's probably my least listened to. I will listen to
Yeah.
it, but I will party out to everything else. Even
Yeah.
classical, I'll blare
Yeah.
classical before I will
Love
blare
it.
country music. That's
Yeah.
my jam.
Yeah. I love
That's
it.
so well. Thank you so much for joining us. You've left us with so many nuggets of wisdom. And in the show notes, I'm going to make sure everyone has all the different ways to connect with you. You share such great information and resources
Thank
on
you.
your Instagram, and I'll make sure that that's listed as well as your website. But thank you so much for being here and joining
Sounds
us.
good. Thank you for having me.